guys, it's Len from the Halfway Homestead. Today we are prepping for our Italian bees that are arriving tomorrow, hopefully. They shipped yesterday, so we're told 2-day mail. We're hopefully gonna get them tomorrow. We've never kept bees here on the homestead. We have very little experience. So luckily my father has come down from Massachusetts, and he's been keeping bees for 5 or 6 years. He's gonna help us get set up. And so it's going to be the three of us kind of walking through this today, and we want to kind of give you a show for what to expect if you've never done this before, but you have someone kind of nearby that can help you get started. So with that, I'm going to shut up and let my father go ahead and kind of handle it and walk us through it.
Good morning. It's nice being down here on the West Virginia border. One of the things that you want to consider when you're setting your bees is that they get sunshine in the morning. And that gets the hive up and moving early, and that means that they get more work done during the day. That sun, of course, goes in the entrance of the beehive, and they say, "Oh, it's time to go to work." So we've picked a spot next to the garden that's behind to the right of me, and we're on a hillside, so I had to dig this out and make it level. So I've already done that, and the next thing I do is I usually take a feed bag of some kind and put down 1 or 2 of them where I'm going to put the hive. And the reason for that is we don't want a lot of weeds and stuff growing up around the hive, and this kind of helps keep that down for quite a few years. So I've already kind of set this up level. I'm just going to put the cinder blocks back in place. You'll often see where there's only 2 cinder blocks holding a hive up. If you're, driving around and you look in people's yards and the hive is tipped this way and that way. With 3 cinder blocks, it allows you to take the frame. Let me grab it. Thank you. This is the frame that the hive is going to rest on, and it's basically squared up with the cinder blocks, and it's supporting it quite well. A hive with a full complement of bees, which often can get up to 40,000 bees, and honey, each of the frame boxes can weigh up to 60 pounds apiece. So it's not unusual to see 120, 150 pounds of weight setting on the frame, and if it's twisted, it's going to distort. As part of this frame, we have an insert. This is all my used equipment I brought down for Len. And this is a screened bottom, so in the summertime they get good ventilation. Any of the varroa mites, tracheal mites, anything that falls through will fall through the screen and can't get back into the nest. In the wintertime, we'll slide this back in, just like so, and that allows us to help keep the cold out. It also, if you notice the brown on it, that's stuff that's fallen through from the hive that was previously on this. Normally it comes bright white, and of course it gets dirty, but it's not a problem. You can scrape that off with a putty knife or what have you. A lot of it's just plain wax from the hive that's dropped down and melted and settled. So once you have that, we're now facing east where the sun rises. We're going to put our first box on. Go ahead and drop it right on there. This is called a deep because the frames are fairly long. And this is where the eggs are laid by the queen, and most of the work in the hive is done. The honey that we harvest is in a super, which is a much shorter frame, not as tall, and that is put on separately. So most hives have 2 deeps. Why don't you grab that one? Just want to set that right on top of there, thank you. What I'm going to show you is a frame that already has some capped honey on it. Come into the camera. If you look here, you can see the capping, and these are uncapped, and this is from a hive that failed over the winter up where I keep my hives. So this is going to give his hive a good start with food right from the get-go. There are people who are always concerned that, well, we're reusing bee equipment. Well, I have to say, every year my bees are in the same equipment year after year. In the wintertime, I can take this hive like here where there's no bees in it and leave it outside, and where I live we get a deep freeze. But if you live in the south, you can take your chest freezer, take these frames out, put them in your deep freezer for a couple of weeks, and pretty much anything that's in there is that might be detrimental to your hive is going to die off in the cold. So this is a plastic frame. They also make wooden frames where you put in a slab of wax. That's the old-fashioned way. This is much easier to maintain, but you know, if you're into going with the old ways, then the wood with the frame and so on is what you want to do.
So regarding like the plastic frames versus the wood and wax frames, I've had a lot of people that I've talked to have, you know, there's the two camps, right? You either do plastic or you don't do plastic, and if you do plastic, and so forth. So I can understand both perspectives. Some of the things, maybe, I don't know if you can address this or not, because we didn't talk about this off camera, but I've heard and read that the plastic frames kind of hinder the ability of the hive to communicate in comparison to the traditional wooden with the wax frames, with the wax inserts. Mm-hmm. Something to do with how they communicate using that honeycomb and so forth, that the wax kind of hinders that. Is there anything there that you can speak to in that space that would?
Well, I mean, I have a friend of mine who lives about 2 streets away. I live up in the mountains, and it's a very small community of 1,800 people. And she uses the wax frames, and you know, I have not seen any difference in what we've gotten for honey. You know, we've both lost hives over the winter at different times, and you know, some years we've been more successful than others. There's also a lot about the plastic frames already have, and I'm not sure you're going to be able to see this on camera, but there's all little tiny holes, depressions. This is coated in beeswax, by the way, and so the bees are automatically attracted to it. I'm going to turn this around. Let me grab a different frame. Hang on. This is a frame that actually got wax moth. It's one of the pests that we have to deal with. Got wax moth into it, so I scraped away most of the comb, leaving what was good. And if you look at these little holes, you can see where the bees have come in and they've started making the comb just like this. And of course I've removed that. In a wax block that's with the wooden frames, they do the same thing. They take and draw out the wax and they make the same depression. So there's been some conversation about between the two camps, that the natural wax is better, and others that this is just as good, and so on. The way I look at it is I've tried to use the wood frames. You have a wire you have to attach, then you have to get the wax on it. It's very difficult to do. Let me back up a bit. It's very time consuming, and when you figure that there's 10 of these white frames in this box and 10 more in this lower box, and then in each of my supers where I get honey, there's 10 in each of those. So, you know, it's a grand total of 40 of these frames that have to be done. And over time, with the wax frames, you have to redo that every 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
So here, where I had a problem with wax moth, I basically cleaned the frame up, and what little debris is left on it, the bees are very clean and very neat. They'll clean that right up themselves. And you'll see outside the hive where there's debris on the ground of stuff that they've taken out of the hive and gotten rid of. So for me, I don't worry about it. But be that as it may, if either the old-fashioned wood frame with the wax is great. Some people use a different type of hive where the wax draw out their own, the bees draw out their own wax comb right from scratch. So there's no frame. And in nature, that's what you see. I mean, nobody goes out in nature, right, you know, and drops these in for the bees. So all of their comb just hangs in basically shallow pillows, as I call them. Okay. So we're reusing an old hive that I had. It's in good condition. I made these myself. It's not, you don't have to have a lot of wood making skills, or you can buy them pre-made. It's whatever you're comfortable with doing. There's plans online. There's dozens of people who have plans for making hives. Be that as it may, this morning I took some time and started cleaning everything up with, Len was off to church. So I was out here communing with nature and did some cleaning. So we're going to set this up now for when gets his bees in.